In this video, we are going to be talking about oceans in jeopardy. And here are the key concepts for you to look over as needed. You can come back and pause later and read those if you would like. So, as we go through this today, the main theme is going to be threats to the ocean. And I genuinely care about and love the ocean, and these threats are very real and serious. However, I am going to pepper in some positive messages through this, or things that have worked, or people that are helping, because I personally feel really motivated when I hear those positive messages about how I can help and I can make a difference. So, you will hear me say some of that. So, some of the major threats to the ocean are pollution, overfishing, fishing damage. This is like nets being left behind, seafood farming, invasive species, seafloor damage, climate change, and development of our coasts. So, pollution in all of its forms can kill marine life. It can mess up with their reproduction. It can cause toxic algal blooms, where this is called eutrophication, where everything grows at once, but then it uses up the oxygen and the nutrients in the area, and then everything ends up collapsing. It can interfere with productivity, meaning like the fishing of an area, and then it can produce long-term effects that hurt the ecosystem. But a positive message is the ocean cleanups that happen. And this is a video by National Geographic called Coastal Cleanup. And I have participated in many of these before. They happen in many parts of the world and at different points during the year. And I highly recommend you try doing one at some point. What's really cool is people come together and they clean up different parts of our coasts or waterways. The one thing that really stood out to me the first time that I went was that some of the trash was collected and thrown out right away, but some of the bags of trash they kept, and then they had a different set of volunteers go through the trash and sort it separately. And their job specifically was to see how many different types of trash, so they could identify the top types of trash that were in the ocean to try and prevent those types of things from getting into the water again in the future. So, from this one coastal cleanup that happened in 2007, they actually collected 6.6 million pounds of trash from 33,000 miles of shoreline. So for each mile of shoreline, they actually picked up 182 pounds of trash. Then, once that was sorted, they found that 1.3 million pieces of trash were cigarette butts, 349,000 was glass bottles, 308,000 were metal cans like soda cans, 64,000 were syringes, which are highly dangerous for people walking on the beach. And in total, 61% of the trash was plastic, and 235 animals were found trapped in the debris, either dead or suffering in the trash because they couldn't get out. So this is an infographic, and you can look up a lot of infographics about coastal cleanup days. But this is one from 2020, and their top piece of trash that they found was actually food wrappers, which can be like juice box straws or fast food wrappers, things like that. And then they found cigarette butts, plastic water bottles, plastic water bottle lids, straws, plastic cups and plates, grocery bags, fast food containers, plastic lids, and then other plastic bags. One of the things that I want to point out here is a large number of these things are plastic. And I want you to consider this plastic water bottle. If somebody goes to a party and they just want to have a drink of water and they use one of these types of water bottles, they're going to drink the water and then they're going to throw it away. And drinking that water maybe takes them a few minutes, maybe it takes them an hour or two, but then this plastic bottle that they throw out is going to last hundreds of years in the environment. So, in other words, I want you to consider that we way overbuilt this piece of material for its use. We shouldn't build something to last hundreds of years that's only going to help us for a few minutes or an hour. So when we have these parties and these get-togethers, instead of handing out a plastic cup, maybe consider using a paper cup, or even better, just bring a reusable water bottle that's glass or metal that you can reuse lots of times and that you keep for years and make so much less waste. Here's another infographic that you can look at, but you can find dozens of these on the internet. So plastic in general is very, very durable. It can photodegrade over time, which means it breaks down by light, but that actually makes it more toxic to the environment, not less toxic. Some laws that have been made to help this is like the Marine Plastic Pollution Research and Control Act of 1987, prohibiting people in the US and companies from dumping plastic in the ocean. I will put that the caveat is for the Navy, and there's a link to more information about that there. But the good thing is that other countries ended up following suit, and some countries have made similar laws about dumping plastic ocean trash into the ocean. Here is some fishing line that is down in on some coral, and I want to point out that on a number of occasions I have been to all of the Hawaiian Islands, and as I scuba dive there, I've had to cut out, or I've seen a number of times that fishing line, fishing lead weights are all wrapped up in the coral. And when I can, I safely cut it out. But sometimes you would be harming the coral more than helping by pulling this out. So you better just leave it. But I want to point out very intentionally that while I do see tourists having a number of bad behaviors and throwing trash sometimes, I've also seen that a lot of this fishing line has been left by locals. And so my point in bringing that up is that there's not just one group that we can target and say it's all you and you are just the main problem. It Ocean pollution and ocean threats is a multifaceted problem, and it needs a multifaceted approach to solve some of these things. This is a shellfish trap. In Florida, they put out about 100,000 of these a year, but they only collect 75,000 of those in the end. And what's sad about that is that means per year they're adding about 25,000 of these shellfish nets that never get gathered up. And kind of even sadder, I think, is that those traps probably did trap a shellfish or a regular fish like a crab, lobster, or a fish. And that organism just ended up dying in there because it was never collected, so it was never used by us as food, and the organism ended up just dying, and it made ocean trash. Probably the scariest video that you could watch here is this one. This one scares me especially bad because it's where I live, which is Southern California. So this is a video by PBS NewsHour. Toxic waste dump site more than twice the size of Manhattan discovered in the Pacific Ocean. And basically, for a few decades, it was found in Southern California that a number of the marine mammals had very aggressive cancers on their body, and they couldn't specifically identify where they were getting these cancers from. Well, eventually, scientists realized that it was from barrels of DDT that various companies dumped in between Los Angeles and Catalina Island. Specifically, DDT is a chemical that was a pesticide. It was outlawed a few decades ago when it was realized how carcinogenic it was. And then these companies that were left with all of these barrels of DDT that they couldn't sell or get rid of, they just went out in the ocean apparently and dumped them between LA and Catalina Island. At the point of time of this video, they've discovered at least 27,000 of these barrels on the bottom of the ocean, but using just robotics. So they're expecting to find many, many more barrels of this. What's terrifying is that many of these barrels are now reaching the point of decay where they're actually leaching that DDT out in the ocean, although we knew that was already happening based on the cancers that the marine mammals are getting. This is a terrifying video to watch, and it's a problem that is just now starting to emerge in Southern California. So this is an island that's interesting to me called Inaccessible Island. The island has very sheer cliffs, and that's why it's called Inaccessible Island. It's a small, like 5-mile island. It's not very big, and it's in the middle of South America and Africa, in the middle of an ocean gyre where a lot of trash accumulates. So this island should have, since it has no humans on it, it should have no trash. But because it's in the middle of a trash gyre, it collects quite a bit of trash. And researchers have been going there for decades and doing forensics on the trash to see where the trash came from. Well, originally, the majority of the trash was coming from South America. However, in the most recent years, the trash that they were finding was actually of Chinese origin, and it was only a couple of years old. That might be confusing to you because this island, again, is between South America and Africa and Antarctica, which puts China all the way on the other side of this map. And a bottle or plastic container from China would take a long, long, long time, much longer than 2 years, to go and float over to this gyre. Well, when more research has been done and they've started like figuring out what's happening, they have found that Chinese merchant ships, like cargo ships, are actually dumping their trash waste out here in the middle of the ocean. They're dumping it as they carry their cargo. And so this is a practice that absolutely needs to stop, because places like this that are normally pristine, that have endemic animals that live here and nowhere else in the world, it's not okay. So the types of ocean pollution, about 50% of it, 52% comes from shoreline activities. This is releasing balloons or plastic cups or plastic trash. So that's all things that we can control here on the land side of things. The ocean and waterway activities, this is from like fishing and those types of activities. About 35% of the ocean trash is coming from smoking. That's so alarming to me. And then here is dumping activities, like people throwing out car batteries or tires. And then this small pink line is medical waste that's going into the ocean. So another type of dumping into the ocean is called bilge dumping. The bilge is the bottom of the ship where a lot of nasty chemicals, toxic chemicals, and oil is actually collected and saved up in the bilge. And normally, a respectable boat, when they get to the shore, they can have a professional company clean out their bilge and pay them a fee, and their bilge is cleaned out. However, non-reputable boats will go out to the middle of the ocean and say, hey, let's just save the money and pump the bilge out here in the middle of the ocean. And here you can see this in the picture. In this movie called DW Planet, bilge dumping, the worst pollution you've never heard of, some people have started tracking these bilge dumping lines, which you can actually see on satellites and then trace the line to where the boat is. They have started trying to chase down some of these companies. Now, of course, some of the companies are not going to respond at all in various countries, but in areas where they can be charged and fined, they will go after those boats, which is great. You might not think this is that big of a problem, except for the fact that just around the European Union waters, there were 1,500 illegal dumps averaging per year out of bilges from cargo container ships. 1,500 dumps just from cargo ships just near the EU every single year. And again, you might be like, well, that's not that bad, except that means in 1 year they would have 5 times the oil spill around European Union waters as the Exxon Valdez, which was a major, major oil spill in our history. That's how much is coming out each year, but in small doses from all of these boats just near the European Union. So by buying all the little doodads and things like that off of these cargo ships, we're all kind of contributing to that, which means maybe we need to, think about keeping our things a little bit longer and not worrying about owning everything. So the fishing industry too, here's some more fishing line that is tied up in this coral, discards 49,000 tons of fishing gear each year and 2,600 tons of plastic into the ocean every year, which is just way too much. Another type of dumping that I will never understand is that the military sometimes accidentally dumps things into the water and sometimes purposefully. So this is the Yukon in Southern California, a very large ship that sunk accidentally and is on its side in Southern California. The military never cleaned it up, and some people find it interesting to go and dive to that shipwreck. But on purpose, in on many occasions, the military has actually taken a number of things like tanks and they've dumped those in the middle of the ocean. If you actually just do a quick Google search or internet search, you will find a number of examples of this where you find tons of tanks lined up in the ocean and things like that. That is just waste that is there. And as a taxpayer, I have a hard time believing that. I know it costs money to bring these things back home. However, I just have a hard time believing that this throwing it in the ocean is the best use that we could make of those, the metal that's there, the resources. Could things be recycled, melted down? I don't know, but it seems like it would be a better use than throwing it in the ocean. This is an infographic on different types of pollution. Some people might think that putting waste into the ocean, like agricultural waste or human waste, that's just adding nutrients to the ocean, but it can carry a lot of disease, and it also contributes to eutrophication that we talked about earlier. Some laws that have actually decreased eutrophication is not having lead in our gas. So by taking lead out of the gas, which was originally put in as a conditioner so that the gas would flow really well, by taking the lead out of gas, it has reduced the amount of lead in the Sargasso Sea by 30% and the Gulf of Mexico by 40%. So, looking at human pollution and human waste going directly into the ocean, it's here's a picture of what that looks like, which is pretty disgusting. But I would point you to this URL here from our shared seas about human waste going directly into the ocean. And you would think that this is mostly from developing countries, but there's a large number of fully developed countries that are still participating in this practice. And then here is another picture of a New York City subway car. Again, the best use these people could possibly think of was to toss it into the ocean when they were done with it, instead of partying it out or recycling pieces of it. It's just really frustrating. For me, when I'm in the ocean, I want to see pristine ocean. If I want to see a subway car, I'll go visit a place with subways. But when I'm in the ocean, I just want to see the ocean. But that's just me. Okay. So this is the picture of the Gulf of Mexico and the 54,000 plus wells that they have to drill oil in. I want to point out that all of the oil companies that are out there, they do not want to spill oil, and they don't want to spill oil because not only will they make money off of that oil, but additionally they don't want to spill oil because a lot of environmental organizations will come after them if they do. So this is a video by Tankers Spill Prevention about what they're doing to prevent oil spills on tankers. This is a video, if you don't know about the Exxon Valdez oil spill that killed a lot of wildlife, this is a video by CNN that will show you what the volunteers did and how hard they work to try to save the animals. So the largest oil spill in history was from BP, which stands for British Petroleum. What basically happened on April 10th, 2010 is a drilling rig caught fire, it exploded, and it ended up killing 11 workers. 2 days later, the whole platform ended up sinking, and it uncapped the well where the oil was just shooting out from deep within the earth. It took them just over 3 months to cap that well with a bunch of concrete, but not before it had released 4.9 million barrels of oil into the Gulf of Mexico. This killed 6,800 animals in total. 6,100 of those were birds. It also killed a lot of turtles, dolphins, and it hurt dolphins for decades afterwards, or years afterwards, where dolphins in that area had a much higher rate of calves that were born with a stillbirth, that they just did not develop correctly inside of their moms. Okay, so the Exxon Valdez was another large oil spill, not nearly as big as the BP oil spill. BP was 4.9 million barrels. This was 240,000 barrels of oil in the Prince William Sound in Valdez, Alaska in March 1989. Basically, the ship ripped open the hole, I believe, in 5 different places, and it ended up spilling the oil. This is a GIF showing what oil looks like floating around in the water. It'll float in these beads like this that resist the water, and so It can be slightly cleaned up in a few ways that we'll talk about in a minute. Other notable oil spills in Mexico and during the Iraq-Iran war and the Shell oil spill. And then I have a link here where you can look up more notable oil spills. So the effects on the animals is that for birds especially, it impairs their ability to swim and to fly. It causes them to get hypothermia because they can no longer use their feathers to insulate. It goes down into their mouth, nose, their like nostrils, eyes, all over the place. And people will work really hard to clean them up, but sometimes they just frankly need to be euthanized, which is really sad. This hurts the biodiversity of the area. And it really hurts most the animals that live there year round. Animals that migrate in and out have a better chance of survival when this happens, but ones that live there all the time are hurt the most. So this is a picture about how the oil can stay persistently in a space and it will last for a really long time. This is a video by MSNBC's BP oil spill 5 years later, wildlife still suffering. Video by Washington Post, California oil spill could affect marine life for years that I suggest you checked out. So I'd like to say that most people think that they want to get away from petroleum-based products, but it's important to point out that the plastics that we use are made heavily out of petroleum. And so I do think it would be best for us to kind of step away from plastics as much as we can and reduce their usage in our life. But we can't fully vilify this and just say that it is just the gas and oil industry. It is also in all of these plastic products. So the way that this gets cleaned up in the environment is that they'll skim off the oil. A lot of times they use straw, which absorbs a lot of oil. This is a super cool video right here from National Geographic about a bacteria that they have found that can be used to digest and eat a lot of the oil that is out there that is currently being tested as a solution when needed. This is a video from the Washington Post where BP talks about how they sealed the well. It also points out how the fishing industry in the area was so hurt when BP spilled their oil. It hurt the small businesses that fished in the area because nobody wanted to eat their fish, even though it was being tested as being completely clean and safe in some cases. After the spill, a lot of people were refusing their food. So it really had long-term effects on the businesses of the area. So the effects of climate change can also hurt the distribution or change the distribution of species. So as the water gets warmer, some animals that can't tolerate that warmer water will move north. And that doesn't seem like that big of a deal for those animals to shift upward to cooler waters that they can tolerate. But then they edge in on existing species that are already there. Two examples are the Venus clam and the eastern oyster that have moved all the way from Chesapeake Bay, which is all the way down in Maryland in 1945, all the way, or 1949, all the way up to Maine in 1995. So in that short span of time, they've traveled several states northward to get to cooler spaces. This is an excellent video. One of the coolest videos I've seen on HHMI, Ocean Species Respond to Climate Change, where they talk about a species of coral that they've looked at on a Samoan island that most coral have a certain temperature range. In this one pool, the coral there that is totally related to the cooler range coral just down the beach, so they're related, but there's pools of it that are tolerating much, much higher temperatures than their relatives down the beach. And they've looked, and this really warm pocket of water that exists in a certain space has caused these corals to evolve on 11 or 100 different gene markers. They have 100 different genetic markers where they have mutated to help them have a higher tolerance for the warmer water. So they've actually looked at starting to breed them with their coral cousins down the beach to see how this goes. This is not a solution for all corals because it's a very narrow pocket of corals that's there, and there's a very large variety of corals across the earth. However, this is something bright and beautiful and happy and good research that is happening down there in Samoa. So These are two videos on how oceans are becoming more acidic and what we're doing about it. This is a video by Action for Climate Emergency. What is ocean acidification? Where it's talking about how carbon dioxide is being pushed down into our ocean waters and making it more acidic. And then a video by Just Have a Think, carbon dioxide removal from our oceans, how we can get rid of it, how we can achieve 20 billion tons per year. And then introduction of non-native species. A lot of boats have something called a ballast, and the ballast is at the bottom of the boat, and you can actually fill or empty your ballast to make your boat sink a little bit and get deeper in the water, or you can empty the ballast to make the boat float up. Why would boats want to do this? Well, sometimes they don't want to be floating too high in the water because it would make them too tippy. And so, as boats, especially container ships, as they release all of their cargo, or a cruise ship releases all of their people onto land, they might want to take on some water so the boat is sitting deeper and is heavier in the water. Well, when they released that ballast water, they release all the different plankton that they collected on maybe a different side of the world. They release all of that larva and plankton into foreign waters, and different things do get spread. Some of the plankton stay in their planktonic state, but a lot of them grow up, and one of them is like this European green crab that has spread all over the world just by traveling its eggs in the ballast water, and has wreaked havoc on a number of ecosystems because it's a very aggressive crab that kills native species. Another problem is aquaculture, that is growing different things in the ocean, like ocean foods that are going to be sold. One of them is the Uchima farming in Kaneohe Bay in Hawaii. And this is a like kelp seaweed that is grown, but when it escapes, it will actually get out of where it's being grown, and it will smother all of the corals that are nearby, and has smothered quite a bit of coral in Hawaii, and is now they're trying to restore it and pull it back and get rid of it. Also, people have bad behaviors, like where they'll do things like release their pets, their like fish tanks in the water when they're done caring for the fish in the ocean. This is dumping fish tanks, is a bad behavior that hurts the local community and ecosystem. So here are community changes that can hurt the whole ecosystem based on human behaviors. So a lot of people want to live near the oceans. They're beautiful, but a lot of oceans have wetlands nearby. And so to live near the ocean, a lot of times people will drain the wetlands. Well, our wetlands provide nutrients, shelter, and spawning ground for animals. In the United States, we have currently drained about half of the wetlands. Now, remember that the wetlands are one of the largest cleaners of pollutions that we have in the world, and they're very, very valuable. So there's some groups that have started restoring these wetlands. The first video I want you to check out is a video by Green Climate Fund, GCF, in Uganda, and this is called Restoring Wetlands. What I really like about this video in Uganda is that it is really an interior country, and they don't have shoreline ocean access. So why is their wetland important? Their wetland is important because that wetland is going to clean a lot of the water through rivers and lakes and streams that are going to come through. It is going to clean that water before it gets to the ocean, and that is really significant. Here's another video from Al Jazeera, Water in the Desert Restoring Wetlands in Baja California. And this one is near and dear to my heart because I actually got to work helping restore this wetland. This is a video by BBC News, The Mission to Restore an Australian Wetland. This is talking about the wetland at Mangala Station, where the Nwagi people bought some sugarcane plantation wetland and pulled out all the sugar cane and have started restoring it to its natural wetland state. And not only has that attracted a lot of native birds and saltwater crocodiles and things like that into the wetland, but additionally, the coral reefs in the Great Barrier Reef that feed off of that wetland have started to restore themselves and have become healthier because of that wetland restoration, which I just think is amazing. Along with coastal development, we need to be really careful with our beaches. Here in Southern California, you can really disturb nesting sites of things like grunion. Grunion are small little fish that come up and lay their eggs in the sand during the high tides. And then when the high tide comes back, the little babies are ready to hatch and it takes those babies back into the ocean. Sea turtle nests can also get disturbed. And I wanted to show you this link. I think it's really significant. It's on the Playa Grande from Costa Rica, the leatherback sea turtles. In the 1990s, 90% of the leatherback sea turtle eggs were being taken by locals for food or to sell. People took note of this and found it to be a problem and started trying to change the tide on this practice. And today, those eggs are way more protected by the people because most of the locals see the value of the leatherback tourism to their area, that locals that formerly used to take the eggs now protect the eggs for tourism and enjoy the tourist dollars that come through. This is a win-win situation for all parties involved. Here is a link to that from Earthwatch. Another great coastal development story that is inspiring is in Hanauma Bay, which is a big bay in Oahu. It's pristine and it's gorgeous. There's a lot of things that the locals are doing to keep it pristine. They have a certain sized parking lot that fits about 300 cars and it's one car in, one car out. So it can never get overcrowded. You also have to make reservations to go. You pay a fee to go. You have to watch an educational video before you go down to the ocean below where they tell you not to step on the coral. They teach you about some of the animals, to pick up and pack up all of your trash. And then maybe my favorite part of the whole thing is that they close it for 2 days of the week to let the entire ecosystem rest and be human free for 2 days of the week. I think that's amazing. And there's a website link to that. Also, if you're interested, here's some coastal erosion in Europe, some before and after pictures of some homes and businesses that basically ended up falling into the ocean, and some before and after pictures on that. So the big picture takeaways from this are that natural changes generally are small and occur over time and give organisms a chance to adjust. Human-caused changes are generally large and instantaneous and do not give organisms time to adjust. So when we're making human changes, we should be really intentional and careful to make sure that we are not harming the ocean resources, not only for their benefit, but for our long-term benefit as well, so that these resources are here for generations to come. This is a great quote by Rachel Carson. She said, "It's a curious situation that the sea from which life first arose should now be threatened by the activities of one form of that life. But the sea, though changed in a sinister way, will continue to exist. The threat is rather to life itself." So really it's us that is being threatened by our poor activities with the oceans. So I hope that you have found a number of positive messages in here and thought of some ways that you can actually help and have a positive influence, not only on yourself, but others, to help reduce and tackle this problem.